This meeting is now being recorded.
Well, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the EDS Awareness Educational Series webinar. My name is John Furman. Before we introduce our speaker, we'd like to give an overview of our free program for those attending for the first time. So we'll discuss who we are, what is our program, some upcoming events, introduce our speaker for this call, and then have a Q&A opportunity. So again, my name is John Furman. I manage the National EDS Awareness and Chronic Pain Partners nonprofit organization based in Cincinnati, Ohio. My daughter Deanna, who is also on the call, leads the Cleveland, Ohio EDS support group. She was diagnosed with hypermobile EDS in 2008. The same year, my wife Carol passed away with breast cancer. I was a caregiver for my wife who struggled with undiagnosed EDS for over 30 years. So we introduced our program at the 2012 EDNF conference to help EDSers form independent local support groups and spread EDS awareness in their communities. We've been a sponsor for these conferences for the last 5 years. We've started over 110 groups to date. Each group is given their own free website with a link from the directory and map. We receive feedback that conferences provide valuable information and social opportunities that many cannot afford physically or financially to attend in person. So we decided to bring the speakers to you through the free EDS Awareness Educational Series. We typically meet monthly. All the programs are free. The meeting announcements and whenever possible, the webinar recordings will be posted on our website at edsawareness.com for later replay. You can receive email announcements for future sessions by requesting the free guide on our site. Tonight's presentation is sponsored by Body Support Store, where you'll find over 250 products selected by EDSers for EDSers. Proceeds from the store and donations to our nonprofit organization help fund our programs. Please visit our store and check out the helpful products that we offer. Just a general disclaimer. This presentation contains general information about EDS. Members of the EDS community voluntarily participate in this program. The information is not advice. If you're having medical problems now, please call 911 or the emergency services in your location. If you're having medical problems, always consult your doctor before making any changes to your treatment.
And wanted to remind everyone that we have webinars monthly, and our next recorded webinar will be on Thursday, September 19. We welcome Dr. Ann Maitland back again, I believe the third time that she's been back for us, and she's going to discuss updates with mast cell activation. And if you'd like to view our upcoming speakers, please visit the webinars page at edsawareness.com for the full schedule or sign up for the webinar announcements via email. For those attending live today, there will be an opportunity for Q&A after this presentation. Please add your questions at any time by clicking the Q&A icon at the top of your screen. After typing your question, click the orange button to submit. And we're pleased to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Delia Chiaramonte, who will be discussing practical stress management for EDS. And she is an assistant professor of family and community medicine and the associate director and director of education for the Center of Integrative Medicine at University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore. She is board certified in family medicine, hospice, and palliative medicine, and certified by the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine. And she's been in practice for more than 20 years, with expertise in an integrative approach to pain management, mind-body medicine, and integrative stress management. She is the mother of 2 teenage girls with Ehlers-Danlos. So we'd like to extend another warm welcome. She's coming back again for a second time to speak for us, and we're very excited to hear about this topic today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to turn over the microphone to you now for your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a topic near and dear to my heart, both professionally but also personally, because as Deanna mentioned, I have 2 teenage girls with EDS, one who is quite severely affected, and there is no question in my mind and her mind also that the way she manages her stress affects her pain and fatigue and sleep and anxiety and all kinds of other things. So all of the things that I'm telling you about are things that we do in our house that really make a difference. So first I want to talk about just stress in general. So we say stress like we know what it means, but when I ask people, well, what is stress anyway? Sometimes it can be hard to come up with a definition. We know what it feels like and what it looks like in somebody else, but it can be hard to come up with a definition. But I actually think thinking about the definition is really important because it helps us think about how we can manage it for ourselves. So the definition that I like the best is that we feel stress when what is demanded of us is greater than what our resources are. Okay, so for example, people say, well, is giving a talk stressful? Well, if you don't know the topic, if you asked me to give a talk on astrophysics, it would be extraordinarily stressful because I wouldn't have the resources to do that. For someone who gives talks all the time on things that they know about, it's not that stressful. So if you're being asked to do something or cope with something that you have the resources to cope with, then it doesn't feel as stressful. If you are being asked to deal with something and your resources are low, then it feels much worse. And that's an important concept. So think of it like this, that in demanding times, either physically demanding times or in your job demanding times or emotionally demanding times, if you have a lot of demands, but you also have really filled up resources, you don't feel that stressed. If, on the other hand, you have a lot of demands on you, either physically or emotionally or in terms of things you have to do, and your resources are low, then you feel tremendously stressed. So sometimes we think or we say, like, well, I'm so stressed because my job is so stressful, or I have that exam, or my boss is mean to me, or my pain is worse. But if our resources are filled up, we feel like, yeah, it's terrible, but it's not as bad, I can cope. So we can address both the demand side. So if too much is being asked of us and we have the ability to get rid of some of that, then that can help. But if we have things that we have to deal with that we can't control, so pain that's getting worse or demands at our work or our home, and we can't make them go away, we have the other side of the seesaw that we can address and we can build up our resources. So this visual I want you to keep in your head, because we tend to think all we can do to manage stress is decrease the stress, meaning decrease the demands, but sometimes we can't decrease the demands, and then the other thing we can do is focus on the other side of the seesaw, which is building up our resources. So keep this visual in your head while we talk. So the other concept that's really important to know is that stress, what we perceive as stress, is cumulative. So we might say, oh, I'm so stressed because I have that thing I have to do at work. But if we also have relationship stress, and we also have financial stress, and we also have physical stress from pain, and we also have things we signed up for that, maybe are feeling overwhelming, plus the media, if that's stressful to you, plus we're living in a stressful environment, all of that adds up to one big feeling of feeling out of control and overwhelmed and stressed out. So sometimes the big thing, or one of the things we can't manage, but we can decrease the size of the pile by trying to decrease the other parts of our stress that we can manage. So just the concept here is that when you say, I'm stressed because, fill in the blank, really you're stressed because of a big pile of things. And sometimes it's the other things in that pile that we can address that helps the overall feeling of stress go down. Okay, so we're going to talk about stress in terms of both outside and inside stress, and changeable and unchangeable stress. And this is important because since stress is cumulative, meaning it's one big pile of junk, anything we can do to make the pile smaller helps decrease our sense of stress. So let me tell you what I mean. First is inside stress. And this is the stress that we create for ourselves by our thoughts and our words to ourselves. So things will never get better. I'm not good enough. Everyone I work with are jerks. My family are jerks. Nothing good ever happens to me. I'll never get my life back. I'll never be happy. I have to do whatever that thing is that we think everyone expects us to do. Those are all messages that we give to ourselves that increase our stress, increases that big pile of stress, makes our seesaw out of balance. And this stuff we actually can control. So I can do a whole talk just on this. We don't have time for that today, but I do want you to think about, are there negative messages that you're giving to yourself? Because those add to the big pile of stress. So if you find yourself saying, oh, this is never going to get better, or I'm never going to be happy again, or I'll never be able, to enjoy my life, or I'll never have a relationship, or gosh, I'm such a mess, I'm not as good as that other guy. Those are all negative messages that we want to put a stop to. Sometimes we can do it ourselves. Sometimes people use something called cognitive behavioral therapy to learn thought-stopping techniques, like you notice that negative thought to yourself, and people can practice actually intentionally saying out loud if they can, or at least in their head, stop, and replacing it with a more positive message. So there are lots of ways to manage this inside stress, but it's really important to know that even though we say, oh, I'm stressed out because I hate my job, if you're also giving yourselves these kinds of messages, this is adding to your whole pile of stress, your whole feeling of being out of balance. So that's inside stress. So the other thing that we can do besides trying to put a stop to the thinking is to put a little distance between us and the thinking. And sometimes people call this a monkey mind. The monkey mind is the mind that says, oh my God, this is terrible, this is awful, what about this, what about this, what about this? And it's sort of the spinning that happens in our heads with all kinds of usually negative thoughts. So if you can practice, when you notice a negative thought or an anxious thought like, oh, it's never going to get better, my life's always going to be terrible, if you can even just label that as in, that was a negative thought, or that was an anxious thought, it seems silly and simple maybe, but just that technique of noticing the thought and labeling it puts a little distance between you and the thought. Because what we tend to do if we're not careful is just because we have a thought, we internalize it and believe that it's true. So if I say to myself, oh my God, my life is never going to be good again. On some level, I believe that as though that's a fact. But that's not a fact. That's a thought that I had in my head. And so if I even just say to myself, that was a negative thought, it puts a little bit of distance between us and the thought, and that helps decrease its power. That helps decrease the amount of inside stress that it adds to our pile. Outside stress is stress that is put upon us by the outside world. So EDS, pain, medical problems of other kinds, financial problems, relationship problems, snow, your dog is sick, my toilets just got backed up recently. Those are outside stresses. So there's inside stress, which is the messages that we give to ourselves, and then there's outside stress, which is what we tend to think of as stress, the stuff that happens to us. Now let's think of both of those as either changeable or unchangeable stress. So changeable stress, this sounds very simple, but sometimes we forget to do this. These are things you actually can change. So if your car keeps breaking down and you have the resources to do it, you can take the car to the doctor. You can take the dog to the doctor. You can delegate things to other people. You can get someone to clean your house if you're able to do that. You can get the teenager down the street to do some of the chores that you have to do. So if you're feeling stressed and there are some changeable things that you can delegate to other people, do that. But, of course, what we're left with is the unchangeable outside stress. So that's the stress we're not doing to ourselves. The world is doing it to us, but we actually don't have control over it. So what do we do about that? Now, here's just something to think about. Imagine that you're up until midnight working, you ate junk in the morning, you worked the whole weekend, you're not exercising, you're racing around all the time, you're fighting with the people in your life, and you're just kind of in a yucky circle of work, all the things that have to be done, try to sleep but have trouble, and you do it over and over and over again. So basically, when you think about your seesaw, you are really out of balance, right? So we've all had times where we've been sort of depleted in our life. And think about when you're feeling really depleted and then something bad happens. So you have a car accident, or somebody yells at you, or there's some huge thing that you have to deal with at work or at home. It is absolutely sort of catastrophic when that happens, right? If you're depleted and then your car breaks down, that's when you have road rage and a tantrum because it's the end of the world, because you're depleted. But think about the opposite. Imagine that you're at a really good time of your life where you're moving to the best of your ability, you're eating well, you're sleeping, at least trying to sleep the best you can, you're meditating, you're spending time with supportive, loving family and friends, and you're doing fun things in your life. So you're really filled up, like it feels like a good time of life, and then some bad things happen. I'm certainly not saying that they're fun, but they are not as overwhelming, stressful, terrible, awful. So what that shows is that it really matters that we fill ourselves up, because stressful things happen. Pain happens, but then other life happens too. So stressful things happen. And the better we are at filling up our cup, the more resources we have. Remember the seesaw in the beginning? The more resources we have to deal with the stressful things in life, including flares in pain, but also work things, family things, life things. So it really matters how full is our cup. And often, if we've been through stress for a long time and we haven't intentionally been filling up our cup can be pretty empty. We can be fairly depleted. So when I teach people in person, I have them draw this square of 8. So you might consider doing this if you're willing. Draw these squares, and you can put whatever you think is relevant to your personal wellness in these boxes. The ones I've chosen are self-assessing your sleep, your movement, your food choices, your relationships, whether you have fun in your life, how you talk to yourself, as in are you really beating up on yourself all the time, or are you supporting yourself? How satisfied are you with your work or what you do during the day? And how much are you finding that you feel meaningful about the life that you're living? So what I'm going to suggest that you do after this webinar is write these down and fill in with a pen or a pencil how satisfied you are with these things in your life. So if you were really satisfied, like you are all about fun and you have a lot of fun and you're proud of yourself for that, you would fill in the whole box. If you feel like, boy, I say negative things to myself all the time, I'm not very satisfied with my positive self-talk, you would just color in a little sliver on the bottom of the box. So this is not how good are you at this. This is how satisfied are you. So, for example, there's no judgment around food. If you feel like, no, I eat some junk food sometimes, but I'm happy with how I eat, you would fill it up all the way to the top. And the same thing with physical activity. If you feel like, well, I may not be running marathons, but I'm moving every day and I'm doing the best I can and I'm really making an effort, I feel good about that, you would fill that all the way up to the top. So the question is, how satisfied are you with these things? And basically what you're assessing is how full is your cup around these things. These are all techniques or concepts that will help fill up your cup, make you more resilient, give you more resources so that dealing with the stress of life is easier. So what I recommend that you do is fill out this thing, fill in the boxes as you feel satisfied with those modalities, and look for the ones that you've only filled up 50% or less, because those are the places to pay attention. When we're thinking about what are ways that I can fill up my cup, you want to look at the ones where you're filling it in 50% or less. Because here's what people tend to do. They tend to do more of the thing they're already good at. So if, for example, you're a great cook and you cook really healthy food, which is terrific, but so if you say, well, I'm going to really work on my wellness, I'm going to cook healthy foods even more. So I used to do 4 days a week, now I'm going to do 6 days a week. But I don't move, I don't sleep, my relationships are a mess, I never have any fun, I'm mean to myself, I hate my work, and I don't find a lot of meaning in my life. So in that case, the last thing that you want to work on, honestly, is doing more healthy food because you already got that one. You want to find some of the ones where you're not working on them very much, where you're not so satisfied with them, and pay some attention there, because that is actually how you end up filling up your cup, increasing your resources, which helps you manage the stress that comes with life. All right, so what are other ways you can do that? So seeking connections with anyone. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be animals too, absolutely. It's tremendously important. There's a lot of evidence that not having close emotional connections increases mortality, increases pain, depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and all kinds of other negative dimensions. So seeking connections of some kind is tremendously important. Now, sometimes they can be little micro connections. So maybe you have a friend in another state. It might be just intentionally sending them a text while you're waiting in line. I'm thinking about you, or, oh, I read this book and it made me think about you. So sometimes we do black and white thinking where we say, well, I don't have time to spend a lot of time with my friends, so I just won't connect with them at all. But you really want to look for various ways you can connect in a positive way with the people or animals in your life. For my daughter, I will say, when she had an accident and was really struggling physically, connection with her animals was probably the one thing that helped her cope more than anything else when connections with people were tougher. So I know sleep can be tough, and the thing about sleep is sometimes we do things that make our sleep worse. So if there are things that we can do to maximize sleep, it's actually tremendously important. If anybody has a 2-year-old and you think about what happens to the 2-year-old when they've missed a nap and then you tell them they can't have a cookie, their ability to cope with frustration and stress to them is much decreased. And the same is true for adults. So things that we do that impair our sleep, obviously, having caffeine after about noon can sometimes impair people's sleep. Using screens, TV, Netflix, phones in the evening can activate our neurologic system and make it harder to sleep. Having it be too hot or too cold or too light in the place where we're sleeping. So if there are things that you can do to maximize your sleep, it's tremendously important. Sometimes when we're really stressed out, we sleep less, which is the exact opposite of what we ought to be doing. If we know this is a stressful time in life, we want to say, this is a stressful time, I have to, on purpose, make sure that I maximize my sleep. So getting off of social media and late night TV and making a regular bedtime that you keep even on the weekends is very important for maximizing sleep. Movement is very important, and it's whatever amount of movement you can do. It doesn't matter what you do, but moving your body is part of filling up your cup. Remember, that's what we're talking about, are ways you can fill up your cup so that when the stresses of life come, you have more resources to manage them. And there is quite a bit of evidence that exercise not only helps us physically, it helps decrease pain, but it also helps improve depression. And in some studies, it improves depression as well as antidepressants. Think about that for a second. Exercise improves depression as well as antidepressants. And any kind of movement is fine. So no judgment, right? What we tend to do sometimes is think, well, I can't do what I used to do, so I'm not going to do anything. Or I can't do what I used to do, so I'm going to beat myself up about it and say, oh, well, I can't believe you can't do anything. That's so terrible. That's not productive. What we want to do is find a way to move, no matter what it is, that feels regenerative and positive and not that makes us feel badly about ourselves. So just walking is fine, modified yoga, swimming, even just dancing in the house. So when I say dance, it doesn't mean to be fancy dance, like just even as you're cooking, having music that elevates your mood and dancing around the house, just something that moves your body. Also, the calmer meditative arts like Tai Chi and Qigong can be a wonderful way to move your body and use a relaxation response, but not put a lot of stress on the body. So creativity is also very important for filling up your cup, and sometimes as adults we are very critical about ourselves and say, I'm not good at creative things and, I'm not an artist so I can't even start. But the practice of creative arts of any kind stimulates a different part of your brain and actually has been associated with increased quality of life and decreased anxiety. So the whole movement of adult coloring books, I think, is wonderful because there's no judgment at all, and it can be a meditative experience, actually. So if you feel called, and you're looking for ways to fill up your cup, see if there's some creative art of some kind that you feel called to do, even collage or painting class if you want to do that, but just even coloring or collage, which any of us can do. We need no talent. Stimulates a different part of our brain and gets us out of the part of our brain that is criticizing us and talking about how terrible things are. You can use laughter as an acute treatment for stress, and I highly recommend this. My daughter, also in her worst times, found this very helpful. So if there are things online that you think are funny, like the screaming goats or animal videos or people falling down, anything that you know makes you laugh, when you're in a bad place, a critical place, a place where you're generating your own inside stress and giving yourself messages about how terrible things are, you can intentionally say, all right, I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to go to the file that I have on the things that make me laugh and use that as an intentional treatment to change your state of mind. So practicing appreciation is also, seems simple, but I swear to you, it changes the way you feel about your day. It's a habit that over time you can develop that helps to fill up your cup. And again, the more resources you have, the less stressful all of the things in life feel. So try to remember when you can to cultivate appreciation for the regular things that you may not normally think about. Like I said, my sewers recently backed up, so now I have tremendous appreciation for functioning sewers and being able to take a shower. So when the weather's good, the fact that we have electricity or air conditioning, the fact that you have a parking place at work, even little things, developing a practice of cultivating appreciation for them helps fill up your cup. And related to that is starting a practice of gratitude. And I know this sounds a little Oprah-like, and forgive me, but I do want to tell you that there's quite a lot of evidence for gratitude and the benefits of gratitude. A regular gratitude practice increases quality of life, decreases anxiety, decreases depression. And so when you're thinking about a gratitude ritual, you want to think about things that you're grateful for that are big things, obviously. You know, I'm alive and I have my family, but also small things, conveniences, things about yourself like your hair or your sense of style or your sense of humor or your perseverance or your strength or that time you went to Italy or that time that it was really tough but boy you grew as a person. Look for all of the parts in life where you can find something to be grateful for. And cultivate a gratitude ritual. So this is very important, and all of us should be doing this all the time. Ideally, once a day, find some ritual that is easy enough for you. So some people use a gratitude journal where they write down 3 things that they feel grateful for. I tried that, but I found it too burdensome, actually, and I kept not doing it, and then I would give myself negative messages about how I can't even remember to do that. So what I used to do is, as I would lay in bed, I would call to mind 3 things for which I'm grateful. What I do now is I text a friend, an old friend, 5 things that we're grateful for each day. And we don't discuss them, we just text them, and that's it. So that actually gets kind of a 2-for-1 because you get connection and you get the practice of gratitude. Now, when you're doing a gratitude ritual, what's very important is that it be different things every day. So it can't always be my family, my friends, and my dog, for example. It needs to be something different every day because what you're really trying to do is change your ability to look for positive things even when things are negative. That's the psychological change that you're working on that helps fill up your cup. So it might be that lovely lunch that I had with the new woman, or the new restaurant that I went to, or the parking place that I got, or the nice thing that my boss said about me, or the movie that I went to with my daughter, right? So every day, calling to mind 5 things for which you are grateful. 3 to 5 things. I highly recommend that you add that to your day. And when things are crummy, you can actually use making a gratitude list as an acute intervention. So both the looking for things that make you laugh can be an acute intervention, but also a gratitude list where you try your best to fill up an entire piece of paper with all of the things for which you're grateful. And that's when you might look at these sorts of things. If you get stuck and you can't fill up the papers, try to think about times when you've grown or experiences that you have or qualities that you have or little things in your life. Try to fill up an entire page. And after you've filled up an entire page of things for which you're grateful, it absolutely changes your mood. fills up your cup, which makes the stress of life easier to deal with. So we tend to ask negative questions like, why did this happen to me? Why is it always me? Why, if this is part of our worldview, why is God doing this to me? Why has this happened? You can train yourself to, instead of asking those negative questions, asking positive questions instead. So I may hate this, but how will this experience help me grow? Did anything positive come out of this? What has surprised me? Do I have a new perspective as a result of this experience? Even the really tough things. So it's very important to develop the practice of asking positive questions. And if you notice yourself asking a negative question like, why is this happening to me? See if you can replace it with a positive question like, how will this help me grow? So when my daughter was at her really struggling at the very most, we just threw out the question and didn't ask her to answer, but just made space for this question of, I wonder what this experience will mean for you. So it's the most intense experience of your life. I wonder what it will mean for you. And it took her about a year and a half, but ultimately she was able to answer that and look at the ways that the experience made her stronger, gave her new friends, she ended up in a new school and with new skills. And after a while, she was able to answer that question. So just making space for those positive questions, even in really difficult times, is important. Okay, so how else can we fill up our cup? Try to notice and avoid black and white thinking. So black and white thinking is, well, I can't go to the gym like I used to, so why bother? Or EDS has ruined everything. Or nothing good happened today, right? So if not a lot good happens, it feels like nothing good happened. The all or none, and this is the kind of thing that helps people feel worse even when not everything is terrible. So in dieting even, people say, well, I had one bite of the donut, so I might as well eat the whole thing, for example. So if we notice we're saying it never happens or it always happens or everything's been ruined, that is black and white thinking, and that increases our stress and empties our cup. So start to notice it in yourself. You may notice in yourself, gosh, that was a really black and white thought. And if you can replace that with a more positive thought, with a positive question, with something that you're grateful for, you start to change the way you think, which gives you a more filled up cup, gives you more resources, makes your stress of life and pain and everything else easier to cope with. And life feels better and things feel less stressful. Okay, so how else do we fill up our cup? We nurture our spiritual side. And so that does not necessarily mean religion at all. For some people it means religion. For many people it does not. But what it really means is connecting with what feels deeply important to you. For some people that's animals or family or being outside in nature or helping others. But it's something that feels deeply meaningful to you. And if you have no idea what that is, that's another piece of homework for you, is to figure out what is it that feels deeply meaningful to you. And you want to make sure that when you figure out what that is, that you spend some regular time attending to it. Because if there is something that feels deeply meaningful to you and you don't give it enough attention, that will empty your cup. So when they look at runners, they look at who are the runners that are the fastest and what do they do differently. So we want to think about ourselves when we are at our best. Think back. If now is when you're at your best, that's great. But if there are other times in your life when you were at your best, what was that about? And pay some attention to what you want more of. So if you say, well, I did spend more time with my friends then, or I spent more time in nature, or I meditated then when I was at my best, try to figure out the things that worked for you when you were at your best and bring those back into the times that are more stressful in order to fill up your cup. Now, sometimes we end up accidentally living a life that is not really consistent with our values. And when we do that, it empties our cup. So, for example, if you are someone who wants to be home with your family and instead is at a 70-hour-a-week corporate Fortune 500 job, really stressful, but what's really important to you is connecting with family and love and friendship and personal growth, that person is going to have an empty cup. So it's not that, I'm stressed out because my work is too much, because a different person whose values were things like power and money and influence, they might think that was a really exciting job. So what matters is that we figure out the things that are important to us and we match our daily activities to those things. So if you figure out what's important to you and you match your daily life to what's important to you, that fills up your cup. Now, it's tremendously important to fill up your cup to find some way to elicit the relaxation response on a regular basis. So the relaxation response is the physiologic opposite of the stress response. So the stress response we're all familiar with. Our heart rate goes up, our pulse goes up, our breathing gets faster, our muscles get tense. Most of us know what that feels like. The relaxation response is the physiologic opposite of that. And there's no one right way to get there. So you can do abdominal breathing, relaxation breathing. You can go to yoga class. You can do Tai Chi. You can meditate. You can walk in nature. You can listen to a guided imagery CD. There's a million different ways to elicit the relaxation response, but you really want to find one that you like or a few that you like and try to add those into your day, because stimulating the relaxation response really impressively fills up your cup. But it's not enough. So, for instance, people say, well, I'm doing stress management because I go to yoga, but they also have all these negative thoughts about themselves. They're living a life that's not consistent with their values. They're not doing things that are fun. So it's not enough all on its own just to say, well, I go to meditation class or I go to yoga, so therefore I shouldn't be stressed. But it is an important component of the whole picture. So relaxation breathing is breathing more slowly than we may typically breathe, and ideally deeper into our abdomen. So when we're stressed out, we tend to breathe up in our chest and quickly. When we're trying to stimulate the relaxation response, we want to breathe more slowly and bring our attention and our breath down into our lower belly. So you can try laying down, putting one hand on your chest and one hand on your lower belly, and trying, with no pressure, because in the beginning it's a little challenging, trying to feel a little bit of pressure on your lower hand. So seeing if you can actually bring your breath down into your abdomen, feeling a little bit of pressure on your lower hand. So sometimes people will do this maybe for 10 breaths before they fall asleep. So when they're laying in bed, they'll try their relaxation breathing before they go to sleep. I'm giving you an example of a super easy meditative breathing exercise. There are a million ways to do it, and there's no right way. The right way is the one that you like and that you do. But just to give you an example of what you might do. So you can think, as you breathe in, just think in your mind 1. You're paying attention to your breathing. You're just focusing on your breathing. As you breathe out, you think breathe. And as you breathe in, you think 2. And as you breathe out, you think breathe. And as you breathe in, you think 3. And as you breathe out, you think breathe. So I would recommend that you try to find a place in your day to do this, counting either to 5 or to 10 if you're willing. This is something you might do as you lay in bed before you go to sleep, because it stimulates the relaxation response, which helps relax the body and mind for sleep. So you can do this exercise in bed. You can do it before lunch. You can do it at work. You can sit in your car and do it before you start driving your car, not while you're driving your car, but before you're driving your car. You might want to consider picking a time when you're going to count your breaths. So maybe when you're taking a walk, if you're walking your dog, you might say the first block you're going to count your breaths, or you're going to pay attention to your steps, the first 10 steps of walking your dog. Or you might say that when you have to wait at a red light or waiting for the doctor, that you'll count your 10 breaths then. See if there's a way that you can put this into your daily life. Most people find it easier if they hook it to something, so either first thing in the morning or at night, or attached to a meal or brushing their teeth or something that they routinely do. But see if you can find a place to count just 10 breaths. And when your mind gets distracted, which it will, which is perfectly fine, you just bring your attention back to your breath. No judgment at all. So here's another way that you can stimulate the relaxation response. It's called guided imagery, and it's super easy. It's easier even, I think, than counting your breaths. You just listen to a recording and have the person in the recording lead you through a relaxation response. So I gave you a website which has nothing to do with me, but I just happen to find it to be a really great resource because they have many, many, many different guided imageries focused on different topics, and it's healthjourneys.com. So they have ones for sleep, ones for chronic pain, ones for anxiety, one for if you're going to have surgery, one for if you're getting chemotherapy. There's lots and lots of different options, and they're all very high quality. So I would recommend that you consider, if you think you might want to try guided imagery, just ordering one of those things. They cost usually somewhere around $15, and trying to put it into your routine. So this is another thing that people can do if they have trouble with sleep, is to listen to a guided imagery CD right before sleep. So those are sitting ways that you can meditate and stimulate the relaxation response, but some people don't like to sit still and they'd rather move. And if that's you, that's fine too. So for some people, walking in nature can be a meditative experience, but you have to think about how you're doing it. So if you're going for a walk in the park, but you're thinking, oh my God, this is so terrible, and I used to be able to do more, and I have so much to do, and my husband is a jerk, and I have so much to do at work, if that's what's happening in your mind while you're walking, that is not a meditative experience. But instead, if you're going for a walk in the park and you intentionally pay attention to what am I hearing and what am I smelling and what am I seeing and how does it feel under my feet and what is the breeze like on my face, so you are really paying attention to the experience of walking in the park, that's a meditative experience. So that's an option. Qigong or Tai Chi class are great options for building strength and flexibility, but without a lot of stress on joints. So they can be really wonderful types of exercise for people with EDS. Yoga, if it's modified yoga, sometimes yoga, if you have EDS, you want to pay attention, you might want to make sure that the teacher is experienced and can help guide you so that you're not hyperextending. But the meditative parts of yoga also can be great. So think about, do you want to experience the relaxation response from a sitting perspective or a moving perspective or a little bit of both? So then there's the concept of mindfulness, and we sometimes use this term mindfulness and meditation interchangeably, but that's not exactly accurate. So mindfulness is actually intentionally paying attention to what's going on in the current moment and not judging it. So, I'm cooking dinner. If I were to cook dinner mindfully, it would be like this. I would notice the colors of the food and the heft, the weight of the food in my hands, and the sounds as I'm using the fork to mix something in a bowl. So that would be cooking mindfully. And we can do anything mindfully, right? The concept is that if we're paying attention in the present moment, most of the time things are not that bad. We often spend time in the past ruminating about things that have happened before. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. I lost that job and he said that thing and that thing didn't work out and they laughed at me. That's in the past. Or we spend time worrying about the future. Oh no, what if I lose my job? What if I lose my house? What if I can't do that run? What if that guy leaves me? What if? That's all in the future. But in the present moment, non-judgmentally, so here I am in the present moment, noticing what's happening, that is mindfulness. And that habit of trying to stay in the moment rather than worrying about the future helps us fill up our cup, helps decrease stress, and helps fill up our cup. So you might think about, are there some times in your life that you can intentionally keep yourself in the present moment? So if you're doing the dishes mindfully, you would feel the heft of the plates, feel the slipperiness of the soap, smell the smells of the soap, feel how warm the water is, right? So you can say, look, I'm not going to yoga class, but I am willing to take a shower mindfully or wash the dishes mindfully or spend 5 minutes playing with my dog mindfully where I just focus only on what's happening in the moment. And if you get distracted, you just bring your attention back to the moment. All of those turn regular life things into meditative experiences that stimulate the relaxation response. So these guys are experts, right, of living in the moment. That dog is probably not worrying about, at this moment, oh my God, what if I get home and they forget to feed me, right? He's just thinking, wow, look what is happening right now. So this is my most favorite slide. This is basically the whole course in mindfulness here. Notice what's happening in the human's mind. Blah, 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 junk, right? Like all the things to worry about, all the bad things that happen, all the things that could happen, all the problems. About what is the dog thinking about? Not nothing. He's not blank. He's just thinking about what's actually happening in the moment. So remember this slide. Remember the seesaw, because we need to build up our resources, and remember this slide because we want to be the dog. Okay, so practicing being in the present moment, that's mindfulness, helps us choose our response to stress rather than being carried away by our response. So it can sometimes be helpful to think about responding to stressful circumstances like this. Practicing some acceptance of what is that we can't change, reframing what's happening with positive questions, which we talked about, practicing mindfulness, staying in the moment and stimulating the relaxation response, and trying to detach a little bit from the negative thoughts that we have and from the feeling that I can fix this, I can fix this, I can fix this. Obviously, we want to work to fix what we can, but beating our head against the wall for things that we can't fix actually increases our stress rather than decreasing it. I think we said that. Okay. So here is a sample stress management plan. This is may not be exactly for you, but it just gives an example of how you can intentionally, actively do these things that we talked about. So starting a gratitude ritual of some kind. And maybe that's a nightly list in your head. Maybe that's a gratitude journal. Maybe, like I do, it's texting an old friend. But starting some sort of regular gratitude ritual. Practice asking positive questions. Practice that. What can I learn from this? I hate it. This is awful, but what can I learn from it? How can this make me stronger? How can I get a different perspective because of what's happening? Sleep, 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 and sleep. Sleep is tremendously important. So if there are things that you can do to maximize your sleep, including adding guided imagery or other relaxation responses before sleep, that's very important for filling up your cup and making the regular stress of life and pain feel less overwhelming. Choose some sort of a movement plan. And don't judge yourself for it. Maybe it's not what you've done in the past, but that's okay. Maybe it's walking, maybe it's Tai Chi, maybe it's more than that, maybe it's simple yoga, maybe it's just dancing around your house. But some sort of intentional movement plan so that you move your body on a regular basis. Try to become an observer of your thoughts. So when you're beating up on yourself or saying, oh, it's never going to work out, or it's so terrible, or that, he's awful or I'm awful, trying to become an observer of your thoughts and label them. That was just an anxious thought, or that was just a negative thought. Do something on a regular basis to elicit the relaxation response. Try out different things. Try that breathing exercise, download a guided imagery and see if you like that. Try a Tai Chi class. Try to go for a nature walk if that's your thing. Try to do mindful experience in the shower or with the dishes. Try different things till you find the way that works for you to stimulate the relaxation response. And then do your best when you notice that you're thinking in the past, which is more depressive thinking, or worrying about the future, to bring your attention back to the present moment as best you can. And I thank you for your attention. All right, I have a couple questions. Okay. Question is, are there tools or free apps that you can recommend for meditation or stress management? I've tried Calm, which is an app, which has some meditation aids and relaxing bedtime stories for adults called Sleep Stories. There are tons and tons of different apps. I actually also have used Calm. There are ones called Headspace, I think is the one that I probably like the best, that people keep mentioning to me, so I think is a common one. And it has very short guided imageries that, they're usually 10 minutes and it builds on itself. So Headspace, I think, is great. Calm is great and Headspace is great, but part of it depends on what it is that you want. Some people will set an alert for themselves to remind themselves to do their breathing exercise. So you might, 4 times a day set an alert. You just need a bell to remind you to do your paying attention to your breathing and counting to 10. So there are many, many different ones, and what I would recommend, if you honestly just Google relaxation apps, you'll come up with a ton of them, and try them out, because some people like some like another. There are ones that just have waves that go in and out that give you a routine for your breathing. Some people like those. Some people like to be led to listen to a guided imagery. And to be honest with you, some people hate certain guided imagery voices but like other ones. So my husband, for example, can't stand the kind of typical female guided imagery voice that sounds like, now it's time to relax. He can't stand it, but he found one with a man that he liked better. And my daughter found one with a man with a Scottish accent, and she liked his accent, and so it was much easier to listen to. So I would say if the first time you try it, you don't like it, try somebody with a different voice and see if that works better. Can you provide examples of practicing mindfulness while we're in a pain flare-up? Sure. So part of what happens when we're in pain is there is the level of current pain, but that pain can generate very anxious thinking, like what if it doesn't get better? What if it gets worse? What if I can't go on that trip tomorrow? So those are the kinds of thoughts that you would really like to notice and say, that's just an anxious thought, and use your breathing to bring yourself back to the present moment. So the one thing that's very important to know is that there's a tremendous amount of research that increased anxiety increases pain. And partly that's because something called central sensitization can happen, where when our body feels worried about a certain level of pain, it actually increases the sensitivity of our nervous system, so that we feel the pain even more strongly than we did before. So our goal in managing pain in a mindful way is to not increase our anxiety around it. So you might bring up thoughts about, I've handled this before, I know I can do this, I know the pain comes and goes. You might distract yourself, as I said, with things that make you laugh, with a connection with an animal or a person, but focusing on it and having negative thoughts about it will actually increase the perception of pain rather than decreasing it. Is biofeedback a kind of guided imagery, breathing exercise, or something else? Biofeedback is not guided imagery, but you could use guided imagery as part of biofeedback. What biofeedback is us being able to affect physiologic processes that we think we can't affect by someone telling us how we're doing. So, for example, in biofeedback, they might hook your fingers up to a monitor that can tell you about your pulse. So, as they may say, try to decrease your pulse. And you could use different techniques to do that. You might use a guided imagery. You might use slowing down your breathing. You might use counting your breaths. And when you slow down your pulse, you'll get a feedback that tells you, yes, you're successful. So many people, when they're doing biofeedback, will use relaxation techniques as part of the biofeedback, but the specific biofeedback part is that you are changing your physiology, and the more someone tells you that you're doing a good job, the more you're able to change it. And so there's all kinds of uses for biofeedback in chronic pain, and specifically around muscle tension. So anytime that we have increased muscle tension, we can have increased pain. And so even depending, there's lots of places we can have pain, but you can have increased muscle tension in your shoulders, in your neck. That can give you headaches or neck pain or shoulder pain. You can have increased tension in your jaw. And when you have stress, you clench your teeth, and that causes increased tension in your jaw and can cause increased TMJ pain, increased TMJ symptoms. So guided imagery can be helpful for decreasing muscle tension, for sure. And there's also something called neurofeedback, which is basically brain biofeedback. And brain biofeedback can be used to help manage multiple things, including anxiety, maybe depression, ADHD, addiction issues, and also changes that happen to the brain after a concussion or a mild traumatic brain injury. So that's a different kind of biofeedback, which is also very helpful. Okay. it sounds like you are also talking about anticipatory anxiety causing stress. So absolutely, anticipatory anxiety is worrying that something is going to happen. So the more stressed we are, the more anticipatory anxiety we will have, and the more anticipatory anxiety we have, the more stressed we feel. And anticipatory anxiety is associated with increased pain. So there are studies that look at what's called catastrophizing and pain. And catastrophizing is basically anticipatory anxiety. So saying like, oh my God, what if it gets worse? What if it's terrible? What if I can't handle it? What if this terrible thing happens? That's catastrophizing. And there's a study, an interesting study that looked at when somebody has pain and catastrophizing, which one comes first? Because you might say, well, of course if you have pain, you're going to catastrophize. But what they found in this study was actually that catastrophizing came first. And they knew this because every few minutes, they were giving people experimental pain, so it wasn't chronic pain. They were giving them experimental pain, and they were checking every few minutes their level of catastrophizing and their level of perceived pain. And what they found was the people who catastrophized first then ended up having greater amounts of pain. And the people who catastrophized less ended up having less pain. So that thing that we say to ourselves of, oh my God, what if it gets worse? What if I can't handle it? What if that happens? What if? All that's anticipatory anxiety. That has been shown, not surprisingly, to increase pain, both acute and chronic pain. And that's why managing our stress, managing our anxiety, stimulating the relaxation response are all really important interventions for managing pain. And I think I'm done with questions.
Okay, I guess that was the last one. Well, you covered the topic very thoroughly, and it was some very practical things that we can do, and we really appreciate that. And I have people who are taking notes and ready to share with their friends. So it's been extremely valuable.
Terrific. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much, and you're welcome to come back anytime. And wanted to remind everyone that we will be posting the recording for this session as well as a PDF file of the slides that were used. So if, like some of the people listening live, you'd like to take some notes on your slides and share them, you can do that by going back to the page on our website that you used to log into the session. And that will be posted in a couple of days. You can also share a link to that then at that time on your social media, etc. And we wanted to thank everyone who attended live today. We wanted to remind you that we'll have another recorded session in September on the 19th with Dr. Maitland, and she'll be doing an update to the mast cell activation sessions that she's done for us in the past. If you want to see those, you can go to our website and click on the webinars tab on the menu at the top, and you can see part 1 and part 2 in preparation for her next presentation. So we want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I'm going to turn it over to John to close up the meeting.
Yeah. Once again, we appreciate everyone that's attended, and we will be posting this in the next couple of days. So please look on our website for future webinars. We also have over 70 past webinars that are categorized by the presenter, the subject matter, the location, and the specialty, so that you can look at other webinars that we've had in the past. So again, thank you all who have joined. Thank you, Delia, and we would like to close out the meeting today. So again, thank you for attending. Have a good day.
Thanks, Dr. Chiaramonte. We appreciate you sharing this, and we appreciate all your time. So thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.